Hey everybody, Kit Cummings here at Power Peace Studios on the Square in Marietta. Today I want to talk about a very touchy issue, and kind of like the last couple we did. We talked about the reopening during the pandemic, then we talked about race relations during this time and what we're all going through. Today I want to talk about mental health. Now, this is an issue or a subject matter that has a big stigma around it, which is what I hope that we can start to address, because people that deal with mental disorders and mental health issues, they feel stigmatized. It's not something that people want folks to know about, unlike other diseases. You know, if you've got diabetes, it's not like anybody, hates on you for that. Other diseases are like that. This one and addiction have a stigma. And so we need to be a compassionate country and really understand that these are disorders and illnesses, diseases, just like all the other ones. The difference is this one affects our behavior. And so addiction can be very ugly. This disease can, and it's baffling for people that love the addict, because the disease affects their brain, which is their decision-making apparatus. In the same way, mental health, it can be very, I don't want to say ugly, it's obvious sometimes, and it affects our behavior. And it can be embarrassing, it can be frightening, it can be downright maddening, for those that deal with it. As I talk today, if there's something that resonates with you, just like it or hit the heart. And if it's something that you have a good comment on, please comment. It helps the discussion begin, and I'll try to get back to you. I promise I'll try to do that. And if this resonates with you and you want more, just click the link below and subscribe. Now, I want to go ahead and say I'm not a mental health professional. I'm not a caregiver. I'm not an expert. However, over the past 12 years, I've done a lot of work around this as I work with young people. I work with families that are basically experiencing their worst day when something happens. A lot of times I get calls. I've done a lot of work in the jail and prison system where there's a lot of mental health and addiction issues untreated. And so imagine not being able to get access to the medicine that you desperately need to be able to see the world the way that it really is, and not filtered through a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about. And also just I work with people when they're having their worst day. And so all the threats that are out there, it's affecting us. But here's, as far as the stigma goes, here's what we know. 1 in 5 of us are going to experience mental health issues. 20%. God bless the other 4 out of 5. But that 1 out of 5, it's going to hit home, and we're going to have to deal with it. Sometimes it hits later in life. Many times it does. Most of these start to exhibit in the teenage years, and we're going to talk a little bit about the teens. 1 in 25 are going to have very serious disorders, which are dangerous. And 1 in 25 doesn't sound like much, but for the one, it's a big deal. For the family of the one, this is a family disease. Just like addiction, it affects the whole family, not just the person who is suffering. We know 23 million families that we know of are dealing with addiction. Many times there's mental health issues that bring on the addictive behaviors, but a lot of times it's the addiction to the drugs and alcohol and behaviors that cross over and develop mental health issues. So a lot of times it's a cross diagnosis, which can make it very complicated. This is the one that hits me close to home, is 1 in 6 for ages 6 to 17. So the young ones, first graders, all the way up to pretty much getting out of high school, 1 in 6 is too high for the kind of things that we're dealing with a young mind, an impressionable mind, a mind that is still forming. And I mean, very, very important times of this in the development of a brain, which takes about 25 to 27 years to be, fully baked. Not that kind. But, these are very important issues. Suicide is the second leading cause of death in ages 10 to 34. Think about that. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for 10-year-olds. We're talking about fifth graders all the way up to 34, young adults. And it's epidemic. The number one leading cause of death with young people is accidental death. A lot of that's coming from risk behavior or drunk driving or just accidental deaths, as people are involved in more risky behavior because they're under a lot more pressure, especially our young people. Homicide is third. So think about it: accidental death, suicide, homicide, all three preventable. These are all things that could be prevented. We know this: stress leads to cancer. The body cannot take care of itself. The immune system is depressed when we experience stress. It leads to heart disease, from lifestyle, but also just high stress affects our ability for our body to work right. It's a leading cause of accidental death. Think about it. When people are stretched and stressed and anxious or depressed, they're distracted. It leads to accidents. It also leads to rage, violence, homicide. So these are deadly, deadly issues. Anxiety affects 20% of us, okay? 1 out of 5 are gonna experience anxiety. And I feel like the more technologically we evolve as a species and as a culture, stress and anxiety are on the rise. So 1 out of 5 was before the pandemic. So I want you to try to understand right now, when we're all going through this thing that none of us has a reference for. We don't have any historical data, because 1917 in that pandemic, there was no way to communicate. You couldn't get information from one city to another, not quickly. And so there were a lot of people dying because there wasn't communication. And now we've got the opposite problem. We've got so much communication, information overload, that it's wigging out our brains as we can't get away from it. This is an epidemic. Anxiety, can you imagine the 35 million Americans who are now filing unemployment, the kind of stress and anxiety? So now there's people that are falling into these categories that weren't there before, and life is triggering these things. I know that in 2002, I was a minister. From 1990 all the way to 2003, I was a full-time minister, pastoring churches, starting churches, preaching for a living. And that involves counseling people as well. And I didn't have any reference point to counsel people on depression. And back then depression was the thing, and we had plenty of anxiety, but it wasn't, the spotlight right now. But I did my best when I was trying to help people, but I was doing it with just compassion and sympathy, but no empathy. And I wasn't one of those people that would say, man, just buck up, get strong, just more willpower. Be very, very careful with people that are dealing with addiction and mental health, or both. If we just challenge them and say, just be strong, like it's a mental weakness or a character defect, man, it can push that person further into isolation. Both addiction and mental health disorders are very isolating diseases. And the person that's fighting it tends to isolate and be in this battle all by themselves. So if we tell them they're weak and they just need to do this and do this and do this, because that's the way we've always done it, we can actually push that person into a very dangerous place, because it's so lonely there and the voices are very, very loud. But then it came to visit me in 2002. And I'd never experienced it before. And all of a sudden, I was shut down. I was going through a time in my life, and it just triggered some things. I think it brought some things up, but all of a sudden, I was experiencing depression. It was much different than just knowing about it. We all feel a little bit blue. This was different. Didn't want to leave the house. I was shut down. And it changed the way that I see people today that are dealing with these issues, because now it is empathy. I remember what that felt like. And so right now we can all relate on some level to people that are struggling with this. Depression hits all of us, but it's an acceptable level. When I say acceptable, think about a top bar and a bottom bar, and everything in between is what we would consider normal human emotion. It doesn't mean that it doesn't shut us down sometimes. It just means it's not clinical. But anything that's outside of those bounds on the north end and the south end, that's what we call critical and clinical. And there's pharmaceutical help, there's therapy, there's counseling, there's all kind of ways to deal with it. But we can all relate to being depressed. Now I want you to imagine someone that shut down like that. Draw upon that memory. Anxiety, we've already talked about. We're all experiencing anxiety, and people are reaching for different things to medicate. Alcohol works for a minute, and then you come back down. Weed might be something that kind of chills you out, but then you still have that thing. Pills can mask, a symptom, or even can relieve it so that you can get some help. But a lot of people are dealing with it purely pharmaceutically, or habits. It can be gambling, it can be porn, it can be rage, it can be shopping, it can be food. There's all these things that we do to try to medicate the pain that's inside of us that needs to be unraveled. But when somebody's shut down, it's very hard to do that. Obsessive compulsive disorder, we all have a little bit of that. I know I do. I mean, the older I get, I'm looking around for things. I'm trying to remember if I did something here or there, whatever. Some people, it's maddening. They can't get out of that loop. It's there every day. Others can understand, all of us can understand ADHD a little bit. Okay, that is a trend that is very troubling among young people. I mean, why is this young generation having such a hard time focusing and keeping their attention? We got to be very careful on this issue. I got to walk very carefully because some kids do need some pharmaceutical help. But unfortunately, we're living in a day and age where a lot of times just the pill is the easy fix, and we haven't really done the research to find out what that young person needs. There are ways that you can go and get a full psych eval on your child or adult and find out what's really going on in the brain and what they're dealing with, other than just going to a primary physician saying, hey, he's feeling a little blue, and then get a script. And maybe we're masking something that could be unraveled, but that is sacred space. We got to figure that out, one at a time with our families. But we all can understand having focus problems, especially in today's world with so much stimulus coming at us, and it's just like it's maddening as well. Mood swings, we all experience mood swings. Good things happen and boom, we're up in this manic kind of area. Tough things happen and we slip down into, this lower energy area. We all know how to experience that. Some people slip into a manic episode where the mind doesn't shut off. They get impulsive. You ever know somebody that's acting out and doing things they've never done before? It can be shopping, it can be behaviors, acting out. And now we're starting to understand that is a clinical manic episode. And then there's the other pole as well. Just being a little blue, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a crash where it's like, man, I want to lay down. I can't go anywhere. And people are dealing with these things. Schizophrenia, we all have voices in the head, and they're getting a little loud nowadays. I don't know what your voice in your head sounds like, feels like, but imagine when the voices will not stop and they become louder, and then they start saying things. What I'm trying to do is to help you understand that we've got to remove the stigma from both of these things, from addiction and mental health. They're illnesses. We don't get mad at somebody because they've got an illness, but this one affects our emotions and our mind. And so it's got to be dealt with very delicately. And it's a dangerous disorder, because nowadays we're dealing in a day and age where we're seeing suicide a lot. I mean, when I was a kid, I cannot remember one kid ever killing themselves. And I can't remember an overdose. I mean, I was growing up in East Cobb. It was a very kind of affluent, upper middle class. And the kids weren't dying like they are today. I poll kids now and I say, raise your hand if you know somebody that's taken their own life. Every hand in the room goes up. It would scare you. And I do that. I talk to the kids. I ask them how they feel. I poll them. They teach me things, and I listen and really try to learn. But they're being stretched. They all know somebody that's died in an accident. They all know somebody that's ended their own life. They all know somebody who's died of an overdose. Addiction has taken them out. And so I think compassion is what we need. And I want to continue to reinforce these steps that I try to live by and I also teach is one, seek first to understand. If you don't understand it, man, go into it with someone that you love, a friend, a family member, and really, really try to understand. We need to ask more questions and be quiet and listen. We need to find common ground, and we might not be able to understand what it feels like to be in a clinical level in these things, but we can at least relate on some level to what our loved one is going through. And there's a lot of people that you don't even know that they're going through it because of the shame. And we need to remove the shame. Ain't nothing shameful about this. We need help. And so that's what we do. It's critical. And so seek first to understand, find common ground, walk a mile. If ever there was one, walk a mile in the other one's shoes before you judge. It's so easy to judge on this one because of the behavior. It affects our behavior. And it's, how do you not judge that? It's so hard. And families, God bless you. If you're dealing with an addict or you're dealing with someone that has one of these disorders, it's exhausting. And you try everything. And then sometimes we just kind of give up. But unfortunately, the person that's suffering, they're tempted to give up too. This young generation, imagine if every time you felt bad, you heard people say, man, just go to Kansas. And it's like, what's in Kansas? Man, there ain't no problems in Kansas. It's peace all the time. No more noises, man. Everything's cool there. And every time that you hear of someone, oh man, they went to Kansas, you be thinking about that. And so when you get really down or something, your worst day happens, I can always go to Kansas. Well, you probably know what I'm saying. If there's this place called suicide, that is something that is becoming attractive to our young people, and that needs to scare us. And the most treacherous ages is the mid-20s. Now, I have opinions and theories about this, but I think this, in this world we live in, this young generation, they're an experiment. They're the ones that everybody got a trophy. They didn't play dodgeball because they might get hurt. Parents come in and fight the school instead of taking the side of the school. And so we have, out of our love and our care for young people, we have protected them from pain. And a lot of times we've protected them from failing. And they're living in a virtual world. So there's a lot of things that we did as kids. We tried things, experimented, risk take. We failed a lot. And I would encourage you with young people, man, they need to fail a lot. Man, failure is not final, and it's not a bad thing. It prepares them for the 20s because you're growing up as a teen, not real responsibility. You get into high school, that's crazy nowadays. A lot of stress on these kids, which is another talk. Then maybe it's college or whatever they go into, and everything's a party and all their friends are doing it. And then all of a sudden, boom, everybody spreads out and goes their different ways. Your friends aren't around. You're out of college. You got your first taste of the real world, and somebody breaks your heart, or you lose a job, or your worst day happens, and all of a sudden you've never experienced that. And they think that their failures are final, and now everybody wants to go to Kansas. And we're seeing a lot of mid-20s overdose and commit suicide. Some of the suicides, I think, are overdoses, and some of the overdoses are suicides. But it's all around these mental health issues. If we will actively listen and compassionately communicate, walk a mile with them, and when we're wrong, make it right, but treat these people with terribly careful care. All of us, because we all either have been there, or we might be there. A couple last things, and this is such a deep issue. Shoot, 15, 20 minutes is not enough. Imagine someone that already had phobias going into this thing. Maybe there were germaphobes, or maybe there was a low level of agoraphobia, afraid to leave the house. Maybe there were issues where you're afraid to make contact. Try to imagine what this must be like for somebody that's already dealing with those things. Man, I can't even imagine. But when I start to imagine your walk, man, now all of a sudden I feel my compassion. This is a time where we need compassion and care. Compassion is, I feel you. I got you is the care. I see you, I feel you, I got you. That's what we're teaching in the schools. For the kids not to do like we do and judge everything and label everything. We're trying to teach them, man, compassion in our schools. And that means I see you. You get to do life how you do. You dance how you dance. You sing your song. You express yourself to the world the way you need to. I see you. And then it's I feel you. Once I give you the right to be you, now I'm going to feel your pain. So people that are struggling with these things, if you've never been through it, please try to find compassion. This is an isolating disease, and now all of a sudden we're in a pandemic where there's no human contact. I want you to imagine anybody that's dealing with these things: depression, anxiety, bipolar, OCD, ADHD, general anxiety disorder, schizophrenia, addiction. Can you imagine being trapped alone right now? Can't go to work, that was an escape. Can't go to school, that was an escape. Can't go see your friends, that was an escape. All these things that people have used to try to help soothe and medicate and cope our way through these things are gone. And so, heaven forbid, we see a spike in suicide, but that's what's happening. That we see a spike in accidental death, that's happening. That we see a spike in overdoses, that's happening. That we see a spike in violent crime and homicide, that's happening. All these things are preventable. And so we've got to look outside of ourselves, outside of our own homes. Now's the time when we connect with that family member that has driven us crazy. This is a time where we think about our friend and that maybe we hadn't seen in a long time. Now's the time to think, man, I bet they're really struggling. Man, Zoom has changed us. We can talk. We can make human contact. These are the times where we've got to reach out to that addict and just say, I love you, man. I'm here for you. No judgment. We're all in this together. If we can do that, we can help one another. This thing is unfortunately on the rise. Today, I'm just trying to relate. I'm trying to feel you. I'm trying to see you. I'm trying to convince you I got you, here for you. We're all in this together. Today, if this has touched you in any way, caring is sharing. There might be somebody that needs to hear what we talked about. Share it, please. And if you like it, heart it. And if you want to subscribe, I'd love to have you as a part of our community. If you want to find out more, go to kitcummings.com or powerofpeaceproject.com and see how you can get involved. Let's fight for our kids. Let's pull our families together. But let's please take care of not just the vulnerable that are susceptible to this disease, but the vulnerable that are having trouble with this one. Okay? Love you guys. I will see you soon. Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 1 o'clock is kind of the schedule, I think, right now for these. God bless you. I'll see you on the field.